In the beginning, we see a special spaceship traveling through space. It has to complete a 20-year journey, and all other passengers will wake up after 20 years. The mission of the ship was to transport humans to another planet similar to Earth, but it still had 90 years of a long journey left. During this long journey, to prevent the aging of humans, they were kept in a special machine that would preserve their bodies for up to 120 years, and they would wake up when they reached the planet. The spaceship had completed 30 years of its journey, when suddenly we see large rocks, which we also call asteroids, in front of it. There is a collision between the two, but the spaceship is so advanced that it has many features. But because of the collision, one passenger's sleeping pod malfunctions, and he wakes up from his 30-year deep sleep. That passenger's name was Jim. Initially, he feels very dizzy, but gradually his body starts becoming normal. Jim goes into the hall where all the group members were supposed to meet after their journey was completed, but he finds that no one is in that hall. But the ship's system is talking to him, as if there are a lot of people on the ship. Jim realizes that there is definitely some problem here, so he starts searching for the rest of the passengers in the ship. Despite searching every corner of the ship, he doesn't find a single mark. Jim gets very scared and starts asking for help in the control room, but accessing the control room without a crew member's ID was impossible. Jim retrieves the ship's location details from the system and finds out that he is still very far from his destination, which means his body activated 90 years earlier. He wanted to inform the people on Earth about the ship's malfunction, so he records his message and sends it to Earth. But he is very surprised to learn that it would take years for his message to get a reply, which means he had to survive for many years without any help. Jim, disappointed, leaves. But then he sees someone, possibly a human. But when he gets closer, he finds out it's just a robot named Arthur, which looked exactly like a human but didn't have feelings. Jim goes to the machine to get food, but the machine doesn't give him the food of his choice because he was a passenger of a lower category. In that category, he was given basic food. With the help of a reminder, Jim tries to fix his hibernation pod, but he can't do it. He also tries to access the control room, but the walls are so thick that breaking through them was impossible. Even the functions of the ship were now causing problems. Jim thought he might be stuck on this spaceship for his entire life and might even die here. Jim says that it's human nature that they always want what they don't have, and when we have no option, it's better to not think about what we don't have and learn to live happily with what we do have. There was a lot to do on the ship, so Jim started living a new life, forgetting what happened to him. He was happier than before, but now he was so frustrated that he even tried to commit suicide. He was very scared and ran away, but then fell where he saw a pod containing a girl named Aurora. Jim starts liking her. Jim spent his entire time watching her interviews because he wanted someone to spend time with, as he had been living alone for so many years. That's why he wanted to wake up Aurora before her time. Jim knew that doing this was wrong, so he spent many months thinking about whether he should do it or not. But finally, he decided to wake Aurora from her sleep. Jim cleans himself up and brings tools to Aurora's pod, where he causes a short circuit, which damages Aurora's hibernation pod, and she wakes up from her sleep. But before she opens her eyes and sees Jim, he takes her to another place and hides all the tools so that Aurora doesn't find out anything. When they finally meet each other, Aurora asks where the rest of the crew members are, as they should have woken up a week before us. Jim tells her that her hibernation pod malfunctioned, just like his, and they woke up 80 years earlier. Aurora goes to the other passengers' pods and finds that all the passengers are still in their hibernation pods. Jim tells her to rest, and they will think about what to do tomorrow. The next morning, Aurora goes to get food, and her plate has a lot of food because she was a gold-class passenger, while Jim had been eating the same food for the past year. When Aurora finds out, she gives him good food too, and they try to break the access to the control room, but it wasn't easy to break. Now, Aurora was convinced that they were trapped here, so she decided to complete her book on another planet instead of Earth. She starts interviewing Jim, asking why he left Earth, his friends, and family to come here. Jim, who was a mechanic, tells her that he liked building things, but since everything on Earth was already built, There was nothing left for him to do there. That's why he wanted to start fresh on a new planet, and that's why he got a discount on this entire journey. When Jim asks why she is going there, she tells him she is a journalist and wanted to spend a year on that planet to complete her book and then return to Earth. But now, it seems that won't happen, because they are trapped here. Aurora asks if there's anything else to do here, and they start enjoying their life together, forgetting their past. Jim was happier than before. They even started traveling in space and slowly became friends. Jim gives Aurora a rose he made himself. They were traveling near a huge star, which looked beautiful with flames coming out of it. Everyone celebrated Aurora's birthday, and Jim wanted to give her a ring. But during their conversation, he accidentally reveals that he woke her up from her hibernation pod. Hearing this, Aurora becomes very upset because the person she trusted the most had betrayed her. Aurora stops talking to Jim. She is so angry that one night, when Jim is asleep, she goes to him and beats him up. She was about to kill Jim, but then controls herself. The next morning, Jim confesses that he made a mistake, but after being alone for a year, he went crazy. Aurora doesn't listen to him and starts yelling. One night, when Jim is in his room, he notices some malfunction in the spaceship, but after some time, it gets fixed on its own, so Jim ignores it. We see that Jim plants a tree in the spaceship. The next day, when he comes down from the lift malfunctions. Somehow, he gets out and goes to get food from the machine, but it throws all the food away. They don't understand what's happening, but then they hear someone's voice. When they go near the tree, they see a crew member named Gus, who had also woken up from his hibernation. He asks where everyone else is, but Jim tells him that all the passengers are still in their hibernation pods. Gus goes to the control room to check what's wrong with the ship, but he can't figure it out, so they decide to manually check everything. When they come out, a robot falls on them. Gus tells them it's a drobot, which is broken. He checks the hibernation pod and finds out that Jim had damaged Aurora's pod. Gus asks Jim why he did this, and Jim says he was alone for a year. But Gus doesn't say anything because he knows what it means to be alone. Aurora asks Gus what he will do now that he knows who damaged her pod. But Gus explains that it's not Jim's fault. Being alone for a year is a big deal. Suddenly, Gus's health worsens. When they scan his body, they find out he has 612 health issues, and his tissues are deteriorating, meaning he will die soon. Hearing this, Gus is very sad and tells them to leave him alone for some time. Gus gives his ID to both of them so they can access any part of the ship. He tells them to take care of each other, and with this, Gus dies. They go to fix the ship, but there are huge fires inside the ship. Aurora and Jim turn off the reactor. Then they start replacing all the damaged parts of the ship. They go to the power vent and open the gate, but the ship's heat is so intense that it is difficult to replace the parts. Jim tells Aurora to pull the lever to release the heat, but the gate doesn't open. This means all the heat has damaged the ship's system, and if the heat is not released soon, it will explode inside the ship. Jim goes outside the spaceship to manually open the vent. The temperature is extremely high, and Jim pulls the lever. The gate opens, but as soon as he releases the lever, the gate closes again. Jim understands that to keep the gate open, he has to hold the lever, but the heat is passing through his body, and it could kill him. Jim tells Aurora to pull the lever, but she says she can't do it. But the ship's temperature rises so high that Aurora has to pull the lever, and all the heat exits the ship through Jim's body. During this, Jim's leg slips, and he gets thrown out, breaking his safety cable, and he starts falling toward the thrusters, where his death was certain. Somehow, he tries to grab a door, and he gets saved. The ship stabilizes, but Jim is still in space, and his suit is damaged. Aurora goes to save him, risking her own life. She brings Jim back inside the spaceship, but by then, Jim's heart has stopped beating. Aurora cries and uses a medical machine to save Jim. She manages to revive him. After recovering, Jim tells Aurora that he can put her back into hibernation, using the medical pod to sleep for the remaining journey. This means she can wake up on the new planet as planned. Aurora realizes that if she goes back to sleep, Jim will be alone again, and she would lose him forever. She chooses to stay awake with him. The movie ends with a view of the spaceship 88 years later, arriving at the new planet. When the rest of the passengers wake up, they see beautiful plants and trees all over the ship, left by Jim and Aurora, who lived their entire lives together on the spaceship.